Welcome to the Sun today for the 7th of February 2025. To summarize, solar activity remains high, although the sunspot number is down to 155. We have one new numbered sunspot region, that's 3988. Flare activity, we have 11 C flares, that's down slightly from yesterday, but there were an awful lot of C flares yesterday. We had 3 M flares, that's up from 2 yesterday, and 5 coronal mass ejections, that is also up. The solar wind speed dropped to about 350 kilometers per second, which is a bit of a surprise to me, but we'll see what happens in the next day or two. And as a result of that, the Earth's magnetosphere is very quiet. Let's take a look at the sunspots. There are 11 numbered regions on the Sun, plus one new region. The sunspot number, as I said, is about 155, and the area is 760 millionths. That's also down. Unfortunately, we're about to lose the major conglomeration of spots in the northwest over the next few days, so sunspot numbers will start to drop quite considerably when they go over the limb. The coronal hole that I've been talking about for the last few days is now well into the western hemisphere of the Sun and should start affecting the Earth very shortly. On the right we have what it looks like today. However, back on the left, this is what it was the previous rotation. Interestingly, the extension of the coronal hole from Sun center to the east limb was there last month. But the thing that has grown is the major coronal hole itself. It's extended north-south and widened. We've also got the new coronal hole near the polar regions. Whether this is an extension of that coronal hole or just the northern polar coronal hole establishing itself, we'll have to wait and see for a bit. The thing about coronal holes that's interesting is that they do not share the differential rotation of the surface of the Sun. They will remain sometimes for months with a very similar configuration. Quite why that is the case, we're not really sure. As I mentioned, Geospace is surprisingly quiet, but that's probably because the BZ component of the interplanetary magnetic field is positive, and when that's the case, there can be no reconnection between the solar magnetic fields and the Earth's magnetic fields, so the magnetosphere remains relatively undisturbed. As far as flares are concerned, we had a whole bunch of C flares, and there was 3 major M flares, one after the other. As that was happening, it looked as though it was building to something much larger, possibly even an X flare, but that didn't happen. So let's take a look at those flares. Again, most of those flares were from those regions in the northwest. We're going to use the 131 angstrom channel from the AIA instrument on SDO. That's about 10 million degrees. And it's going to be a 24-hour movie for the 7th of February. I did catch an interesting event from the far side of the Sun, and you can just see that by looking at the AIA Helium 2304 channel. This is a 3-hour movie taken yesterday on the 6th on the northwest limb of the Sun, and there's going to be 2 repeats. The interesting thing is this is from the far side of the Sun, and so must be truly a massive eruption to be shown that way. It also doesn't show any sign of any of the material falling back to the Sun. As far as coronal mass ejection activity is concerned, only 5 CMEs were recorded by SOHO. The solar wind speed decreased to 350 kilometers per second, as I said. And so we're going to look at a movie of the C2 coronagraph with the SDO AIA Helium-2 disk image for the center of the image. And this is followed by the LASCO C2 and C3 movies. And now for tomorrow's forecast. It looks like the sunspot number will start declining fairly soon. That will mean that flare activity will also moderate. Because of the presence of that coronal hole, the solar wind speed should increase the next day or two. And I've been saying that for a couple of days now, and it hasn't, but I suspect it will. And if that happens, there should be increasing geomagnetic activity if the BZ component starts turning negative. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Stay safe until next time. Goodbye.